от международных отношений берут практически всех желающих, кто в состоянии сдать психометрический тест, то есть экзамен. Но это не факт, что они потом получат место на госслужбе, немедленно, так сказать, должность в юридической компании или там назначение в МИД. Да? Существует разница в понимании. В Украине, если я правильно понимаю ситуацию, как и на большинстве постсоветских стран, образование – это и специальность, в Израиле нет. В Израиле это образование, но это не специальность, специальность потом нужно приобрести. И в этом смысле, я думаю, что вот как раз тут мы должны понять, что можем взять друг у друга. Я абсолютно согласен с профессором Зениградом, что вот эта вот российская, постсоветская, советская тогда еще система факультетов повышения
French, and it's then again, it's also a two-way street. It's not fair to say that this interest is not there. There's an interest in Israel as such, to its heritage, to its culture. But there are two factors at play here. That in terms of most books that actually have been published for not to enlighten Ukrainians, but to be used in training in Israel. In terms of, indeed, there may have been a larger number of publications published, but it's then again, these have been very targeted publications, and not for the Ukrainian public at large. Now, another factor is related to the fact that to a large extent, this information, this academic playing field has been dominated by Russian-speaking, Ukrainian-born Israeli citizens. But it's why translate from Hebrew if Russian language sources are available? And it's not a bad thing. Sometimes it really works, but maybe this, to a large extent, is the explanation of what we're facing now. Now, I would like to close by stating that this type of cooperation on this playing field of understanding history and anything that relates to this, to gaining an understanding of this, I would like to turn your attention to two things. So what we are still lacking, we still lack full access to the archives. It's this cooperation between the archives of two countries would really make a lot of difference. Now, while unless we stop putting our full reliance on the government authority, it's certainly good to promote this intergovernmental relations, and but we shouldn't really rely too heavily on that, on these interparliamentary visits, for instance, intergovernment visits. So we need to have teams of researchers from both countries active in their own fundraising activities, pushing ahead with their own agenda, and we need a network of cooperation. It's just back to what Simon was talking about. We probably will not affect a breakthrough. What is good news is that from his perspective, that even it's a little bit gloomy. This is how this panel is playing out. It's against this backdrop, but it's then again, a lot has been accomplished. If we are willing to do more, let's do more. Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Hanin, for this in-depth analysis. Now you see, we've been listening to two Israeli colleagues that's slightly more pessimistic, but Dr. Hanin sort of closed on a more optimistic note. So, what is this old joke? What is the difference between a pessimist and optimist? The true pessimist. Optimist says, yeah. Pessimist says, yeah, it's going to be worse and worse, and the optimist says that it will. Didn't quite catch the joke. Never mind. Okay, just back to the points made by my distinguished colleague, Professor Zay. Strange as it may sound, I'm about 90% in agreement with what you have expressed, and it's just three things that I would like to share. One is that you may be now laboring under this illusion from something that he said, that there was a point when Ukrainian studies existed in Israel and now they don't. No, they never did. Actually, there was only one course in not even Ukrainian history, but Ukrainian-Jewish relations. It was a course that I myself once taught, and this was actually came with the suggestion of my colleagues from this Ukrainian Jewish Encounter initiative, and there hasn't been a single course on this subject created ever since. Not claiming to be an expert in this particular subject domain, but at least it's fair to conclude that there never existed any Ukrainian studies in Israel. It's something that we can try to fix, but not history. We are talking about history. This is the main subject of this panel. Okay, fair enough. We can always step back and, okay, there may have been something along these lines. My second point on which I beg to differ from Professor Khanin, that okay, if we push ahead with this, then the ministry is going to set this up as a major look. Students in Israel know very little about the Great French Revolution, about Napoleon. It's only about from the Jewish context how he actually what he did to the Jews. So we thought if we were to push ahead with this, push it through. If I was somebody at the Ministry of Education responsible for this, I would say, you know what, this is my priority number 322. Let's get those 321 above out of the way and then proceed to this one. It's probably not something that the public really calls for. It's probably not something that would come in response to expectations. That's why there's probably hardly any pressure. So, okay, Zeev was certainly driven by the most noble of causes, and then I was thinking while Zeev was like, so please do not take my pessimism at face value. I call myself a moderate optimist. It's just that it's just by drawing these comparisons with the study of Polish Jewish relations that is more central even to Israel. The same applies to the same relationship with Romanians, with Hungarians. All these countries actually have produced a lot of Israelites now, and their interest, that interest in the study of that, it's now down at the level of folklore studies, something like this, and that's why in this particular context, this is not anything special in that it's just that yes, Israel has heritage in Eastern Europe, and there is some interest in studying it, basically. But Ukraine is no different. Thank you, Simon. Just a brief comment, a brief remark that I would like to make. It's back to the question of how interested Israelis are in Ukraine. We have been approached. The libraries in Israel have approached Ukraine, and they want to buy books, and not from Ukraine, not necessarily dedicated to the history of Jews in Ukraine, and there's an interest in Ukrainian history as such. So the National Library of Israel is going to set funds aside to procure Ukrainian history books from Ukraine. Now they have invited advice on this. Consultants will be working to help them identify the texts that they should acquire. So there's some signs of growing interest, and now we've been joined by Dr. Anatoly Podolsky, director of the Ukrainian Center for the Study of the History of the Holocaust. Yeah, now, just to cue you in, we are talking about Ukraine studies in Israel and Israel studies in Ukraine. Sorry for coming late. Thank you for the opportunity of speaking at this conference. I was in Vinnytsia province this morning, and we met with local teachers, and I had to rush here from that event. I was scheduled to speak during the previous session on education, I'm still going to deliver my talk now, but I will try to sort of link it to the current subject. So it's not going to take long, maybe 2 or 3 hours. Okay, I'm joking, 10 minutes. Okay, what I wanted to emphasize, that what I've been expressly asked by the organizers to do, is whenever we are talking about the current state over the past 25 years of Ukraine-Israel cooperation, so I've been asked to speak on internships for teachers, for history teachers, and why this actually links back to this session is that many of those interns, they now have become professional researchers, dedicated to this particular field of study. So since 2006, the Yad Vashem Memorial is at the Ukrainian section. You know that Yad Vashem delivers history and methodology workshops to historians all over the globe, but the foundation did have a Ukrainian stream, and it's headed since 2006. And our center to very powerful NGOs committed to the preservation of Jewish legacy and heritage in Ukraine. We're going to celebrate 15 years in existence next year. So we've done something, we've achieved something, and it's quite interesting. If we think about it, prior to 2006, Ukrainian teachers had traveled as interns to Yad Vashem, but as members of Russian groups. They did not really identify themselves as Ukrainians. These were 2-3 day training courses, and some of those interns stayed. So Ukrainian teachers would travel there as members of the Russian delegation. They did not really represent Ukraine there. They were pretty much regarded as a post-imperial, post-Soviet group, because there were Moldovans and Belarusians, and Moldova still doesn't have its own group at Yad Vashem. Latvia has tried to set theirs up twice and failed so far. It all bumps into funding constraints, and actually it's for 11 years that we've run joint projects with Yad Vashem and with help from the Ukrainian Eurasian Jewish Congress. So we have summer camps. We've had them over the past 5 years. We're talking about history masters, school history masters. So it's certainly it needs some funding. So we had 75 applications from all over the country, west and east alike. So we actually had 2 people competing for one ticket. So people who want to take internships at Yad Vashem, they will have trained in Ukraine. So 3 days ago there was a group that came back, and with assistance from the Eurasian Congress, we've invited our colleagues to join this group, teachers, history, scholars from Belarus, from Moldova, who don't have their own representations. This year we've had representatives from Kyrgyzstan, but this is a Ukrainian group, and then it's just very briefly 11 groups, about 300 professional Ukrainian historians have taken Yad Vashem internship. So most of them have not continued pursuing this field of study, but some have. Some of them have either authored their own training courses, now teaching this subject. And other than the 11 teacher groups that we've sent, that our center is also trained up through for groups. So the Ukrainian stream at Yad Vashem has now become reality. So it's interesting, the outcomes of this cooperation, just on top of learning teaching methods, a different approach to teaching, and this appreciation of the importance of inclusion of the Holocaust in teaching the history of World War II and comparing the historiography from both traditions, Ukraine versus Israel, and these teachers often come from very remote villages. It's not, you don't have people from provincial capitals. It's mostly small communities. Yes, because they have a lot of local folklore, heritage, and knowledge, and they then continue cooperating with Yad Vashem on a bilateral level. They write their own case studies for their townships, and they basically restore this heritage to those places where this Jewish faith existed. 70 up to 70% sometimes of the population were Jews prior to 1939. Then a lot of these teachers take online courses offered by Yad Vashem. So it's a Ukrainian page on the official website of Yad Vashem has been created, and it's in Ukrainian, and to which we contribute. And this situation is quite an interesting one. A 2-week training course. The language is Russian. A couple of lectures in Hebrew and English, and using an interpreter. The same is taught to other post-Soviet representatives. Now, the trend over the past 5 or 6 years is that a certain proportion of our faculty are capable of conversing in Russian. It's only natural that they are in their early 30s, that they actually got their education already in independent Ukraine. They can speak the language, the Russian language, but it's maybe a little too difficult to write in Russian. But it's due to this cooperation between Yad Vashem and our institute, we have introduced Ukrainian language lectures, and this is now there's this Ukrainian page on the Yad Vashem website. The bottom line is that a number of courses have been created by our students, and then there's the comparison between the destiny of various groups, including the Jews, prisoners of war, Romanians. It's just comparing the various schools of history and thought, and it's back to this, as to some statements made by my colleagues, and it's this exchange of literature. This is another modality, is interlibrary relations, and this exchange of literature has been in place for 11 years under the auspices of Yad Vashem. So we send them publications, we get theirs, Holocaust studies from Yad Vashem, all publications that we've made over the past 11 years. We also send them routinely to Yad Vashem, to the Yad Vashem library. And then, last but not least, my closing point is that now the situation is that now there is a network of people who attend those 2 weekly training courses. They go to the summer camp in Ukraine and they share their product. When they started, so there was like 2-day workshops, and it was like pretty basic education. Now, these these summer camps are more thematic. It's the theme of collaboration, or the theme of relations in distress between the various ethnicities. This Holocaust and genocide studies, comparing the Holocaust with other acts of genocide, and it's especially among the young who have been trained in an independent Ukraine already, without much Soviet legacy. They are free to speak about complex things. So it's like Jegozmatika. So this is quite a complex topic, quite controversial. And this conflict of the hardliners of the Ukrainian nationalist movement, and that these are huge conflicts between that and the historical memory around the Holocaust. Now, this discussion is taken to the fora under Yad Vashem, and then if this is some piece of analysis of like the Holocaust and modern times, then that's where we print. If there's something more informative, it's a bulletin that we issue. But then we expect our graduates to put their own training courses together, and it's something that could be of interest to my colleagues from Israel, is that we have statistics and various interesting and insightful thrusts over the years. It's like entire generations. And what we started seeing increasingly is that the Yad Vashem level of lecture is not sufficient for the Ukrainian that travel take internships. So it's back to this announcement about the initiative from the National Library of Israel, just to thank Anatoly and his publications, and those and Leonid's Center. They've been sharing this on an ongoing basis, but these Ukrainian centers interested in sharing and disseminating the books to be incorporated in the archives of the National Library. But if you have this famous historian, Gritzak, and he's issued a history book, and he's written a book that we don't have it, Andruchovich and Zabushko are authors of growing acclaim, that we want their books to be on file with us. Just back to the point raised by Anatoly about his internship initiatives, and there's a new type of internship that Mr. Simon Goldin is involved with, and but myself, I not represent the Judaic Society, but also the first master's curriculum program in Judaic studies, and that's we've had beginning this year. We've started having monthly internships for Ukrainian students to go to Israel, to Jerusalem University, and until recently, that's when young Ukrainian researchers, if they wanted to pursue their field of study by taking an internship, by going to Israel, so they had to apply to the Ashnaf program that was launched several years ago by the Moscow-based center. Sorry, I missed. So it's a lot of interest on the part of post-Soviet scholars. Not so many of them from Ukraine. Now, in terms of numbers of enrollment, this internship may not be very large, but this year, with support from the Nadar Foundation, from the James Timothy Foundation, and the Association of Ukrainian Societies of Ukraine, represented here by Mr. Joseph Zisels, and these internships have become possible with a growing number of students going to Israel, and we very much look forward to taking this forward and expanding this type of internship. An interesting situation that this year we've had 10 students. It's our Ukrainian group, together with the Ashnaf program by the Sefer Center, and out of the 10, 9 have come from Ukraine, and it's a great breakthrough.
So I want to ask Professor Hanin to talk about his experience that's happening right now and should be ended by the end of this year, the first volume of Israel Studies. Thank you. Yeah, I already mentioned it in the during the last discussion panel, but I will be happy to repeat for our colleagues attending right now. As I already mentioned, most of the materials regarding modern Israel, state of Israel, its history and public institutions, and territory of Israel/Palestine is very important, and during in those institutions where Israel studies, Israel history is studied, and the interests from Israel country to for Ukrainian history, healthcare, and everything to this. And so the literature for those who would like to study Ukrainian to the best of their to the best of the resources able. There was no such material, so with the University of Ivano-Franka we decided to fulfill this gap, to eliminate this gap, and during the during the next months we want to hold the conversation and publish this first volume. And this book will be officially recognized as a material for Israeli studies in Ukrainian, and we will expose and this book will expose and deliver as to the best of its ability the history of Israel from the of creation to this day, and Israeli community, society, Ukrainian-Israeli relations. So I would pretty much say that we need to agree to everything that was said, and I'll accept the Semen's golden critique, and I don't want to talk back to him. However, even though I have something to say to him, I actually love the idea that Mr. Feinberg expressed 20 years ago on the Hebrew studies conversation discussion. So we need to always keep in mind that we are right now in this island of knowledge. Even though it's small, we need to broaden it, enlarge it. So thank you very much. Thank you, Zayev. And after the talks we received from our speakers, we have 5 minutes for comments of our speakers, if they are willing to share one towards other speakers. Mr. Vladislav, so do I need to comment on somebody specific or anybody? Okay, so I think that in the course of this panel discussion, I want to give a few words more about this book. So it's written about Israel. So its name is History and Memory. So, and it encompasses encompasses knowledge and material and history before Babyn Yar, during Babyn Yar, and after post-Babyn Yar periods. So it explains how was the society established and governed within that place. And regarding this section post Babyn Yar period, it explains how the memory about this event has been established from that period, of time to up to this point in time. So during 50s and 60s, there was actually a moment where the consolidation of people took place who were fighting for civil rights, for rights to move back to Israel. And in this context, this section explains this matter. And also Ukrainian-Israeli initiative and both Ukrainian and Israeli scientists and experts who helped a few more names and a few more figures that helped to establish those relations. Yeah, and everybody from that figure is of age 80 or more. And I think the prospects of our research and we have only one institute that studies Israeli history of Eastern studies. And Israel is very important in this context. And however, it's said but true, but Ukrainian scientists and historians are not paying full attention to Israeli history. But however, I think there is a good potential for establishing these Hebrew studies and interest towards those. And I think that those Ukrainian scientists who are delivering their attention to Holocaust, they will through that event go to Hebrew studies. So, Mr. Leonid, so given everything that was said by my colleagues, it is obvious that interest from Ukrainians to Israel is far more is bigger than the interest from Israelis to Ukraine. And a lot of achievements in technology, military, and medicine and I believe this was discussed during the course of other panels. The cooperation is still is in the process and is taking place. So I think if Ukraine becomes is going to become as interesting to the world as Israel is, I believe that that's the moment when Israeli people will start being interested in the Ukrainian history. And Ukrainian history has the main part of Israeli history in it. Thank you, Mr. Leonid. I want to digress a little from our abstract talks, and I want you to give a concrete example. I want to introduce Oksana Remarovich. She is a graduate of the first master's program of Hebrew studies, and now she is in postgraduate, and she prepares his thesis on the life of Israel in 77th to 90th years. And now we have a few minutes for a question and answer session. So let's first ask Mr. Salmon if he has any question. If you have any questions to him, for him, because he actually needs to leave in a short period of time. Do you have any questions for other speakers? You have any other comments? Okay. Mr. Josip, thank you. So I want to clarify, I'm not a historian, Mr. Fingbert. So if I am incorrect in historian facts, please excuse me. I'm a physicist. And I'm a theoretic. And since I am one, the one can explain anything in the world. So I want to talk about, in the context of Israeli-Ukrainian relations, I want to ask the question. So 25 years or more, I'm trying to explain to people that Israel cannot happen. Ukraine and economically wise. Why? Because Israel is a small part, has a security concerns, and and Ukraine needs bigger country to help Ukraine in this matter. However, Israel can share its theory and practice of establishing a democratic state in this day and age. And this is very important because there are a few premises to actually grounds to actually state that we are not that all that of the same matter. So Israel, as well as Ukraine, same as Ukraine, is very fragmented society. It consists of different ethnic groups, and these groups have different history. And regarding Ukrainian establishment of Ukrainian state, and since we are only in the 30s, we have only 30 years of independence. We need to talk about how to get those groups together, and the correlation of this modernization process is very important to create and to get together these groups. And given the words I heard, that it's very hard to get Israeli involved in and interested in Ukrainian history. As we see in Ukraine, we have different parts of the society are involved on a different scale in volunteering, and also minorities and other groups that are getting up the speed at far more slower pace than others. We shouldn't despair. And as a manager, I am very interested in different ideas and programs and projects that we can actually implement in real life. And I'm trying to find a financial and professional rationale for them. So I want to talk to you about peace, a solution between Ukraine and Israel. And we have a 300,000 Jews in Ukraine ourselves, and we see that they have different views of life as in comparison to others. And I'm recalling Polish riots against Russian, Soviet Union, and I recall how Jews were getting more and more involved in this fight against Soviet Union, and they thus increasing the tension within the society. And as you recall, 2 years ago, Ukraine saw herself the Maidan revolution and how those processes are in action. And this influences the peaceful solution between armistice between Ukraine and Israel. And there is one hidden rock on our way that obstacles us from doing this. We have Ukrainians, Polish, Belarus, and other nationalities, and they establish this anxiety in themselves, anxiety of being a victim. That from one part it helps us to see our identity, and we can judge by starvation period that we had. However, from the other part, this idea of always being a victim is makes people think that they need to accuse everybody but themselves. Everybody is it's everybody's fault of their issues but themselves. So we need to always keep this in mind. And so, besides this matter that hampers our development, there is also another idea I have. Let's just write our history in a true way, so that Israeli people will write their genuinely their story in a candid way. Then Ukrainian will do the same, and because as of right now we have this victim syndrome where high officials and regular common people, they just accuse each other in their problems, and this creates more and more tension in the society. So, and that's one type of the initiatives I'm trying to implement. So I urge our historians to write true history of Ukraine and what we did right and what we did wrong. And my reading, in my book, I already saw a few historians who are ready to write this candid history. So now I'm willing to find a few from a Hebrew side. So let's now wrap up. Thank you very much for your comment. Our panel discussion was fruitful and vivid, and I hope that a cooperation between Ukraine and Israel will just be fruitful and move forward. Thank you everybody for panel discussion. I want to bring your attention to presentation in main hall Rewalk Robotics. So please go there and enjoy to Grand Ballroom. Thank you.
Катя, спасибо большое. Все отлично. Все получилось. Все получилось хорошо. Ленечка, спасибо. Спасибо, дорогой. Ты задержишься на коктейль или ты поедешь?
Нет, к сожалению,
Нет, да?
у меня сейчас встреча, я должен встретиться с